Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. And as many roster changes are expected over the coming weeks before the start of the Major 4 qualifiers, the first one has been rumoured to be occurring very soon. Ravens dropping PaulEhx, it seems, in their roster, bringing in a replacement, and many interesting implications as a result. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to dive into today. Firstly, I wanted to mention this. I thought it was an interesting observation from Jacob Hale that Daniel Sai replied to Emmy talking about the possibility of a female league. And there's been discussions like this for quite some time. It happened even like in the CWL days. There was something like this that was going on. And of course, a lot of esports, they do support. They have some, like in Valorant, they've got game changers, for example, that goes on alongside the main league. Now, in fairness, right, even for regular sports, it's only in the last few years where these have really started to become like a prominent feature of what those leagues are supporting. And Emmy makes an interesting point that by the time like anything like this does arrive for the CDL alongside it, there might not be any women left competing. At the same time, though, like there is an argument to say. I know many were saying, well, like, look, focus on your own league first. You know, like there's things to be done with the actual CDL before maybe focusing elsewhere. But also, there's nothing, you know, stopping female players if they're good enough to compete in the CDL. Like there's not in, let's say, the NBA or something, or in regular sports, differences in height and strength and this sort of stuff just make it not feasible to compete in the men's league. Let's just say as it is. But in in esports, it's not necessarily the same deal. Not to say that a female league wouldn't have value, but to say that, players like Kels, for example, she, I think, qualified for the elite, one of the better challengers players in Europe, so there's nothing stopping her theoretically from making it into the CDL if there was an offer there. So, I don't know, interesting observation. Intrigued to hear your thoughts on it in the comment section below. The other thing that Daniel Sai confirmed is why OpTic aren't allowed the white jerseys anymore. OpTic have always had the championship whites, you guys might know, for years, whereas if they make the championship Sunday, they'll come out in white jerseys, and it's always been a thing that they used to do. However, this weekend they had to come out in black jerseys again because they haven't been allowed the white jerseys because I guess the CDL have only one SKU, as he describes the kind of technical term. It basically just means they only sell one type of jersey now. They don't do the black and the white jerseys. They just do straight up primary color jerseys. So I guess what they think is, well, because we aren't selling it on our official site, therefore the players can't use it. But, like if OpTic were themselves to say, hey, we'll sell this as like a one-off thing, and what's to stop the players really wearing it? I don't really understand. Like the players have been denied wearing it, I guess because it's not available for sale. But you'd feel like if that was the restriction, then they could find a way around this, that maybe OpTic could sell it themselves or something, right? I don't know. It's a tradition that should be returning, in my opinion, at the very least, because they've made a couple of good championship Sundays as of late. Let's talk about some of the players then, because some of them are getting replaced. Of course, all these guys here have been on their team since the start of the season. This is 30 bomb leaderboard. Envoy and Hydra leading the lines. Scrappy in third place, then Pred, then Sib, and then, of course, it goes further down from there. But many challenger players are currently on the radar of professional teams. Doug says, of course, this is a clip from this past weekend, pretty remarkable actually, when Boston Academy played Team Notorious, of Kremp going on an absolute monster streak here. And as Doug says, Kremp and Pentagram is the best sub-duo competing in challengers right now. Glad they're getting the recognition they deserve. Literally had chills this map watching Kremp kind of go to work. I mean, here he's on a 10 streak and he just straight up keeps on going effectively. So, I mean, look, Kremp and Pentagram did a great job on the Boston Academy this weekend with, of course, Doug, Sense Martin and Shawnee on the team as well. And it's got to be said, Doug gets a lot of flack, but this guy teams with players that go on to do great things. And I can't think that it's just pure luck that Doug keeps teaming with players that end up getting into the league and doing incredibly well. There must be another element of the story where Doug is helping these guys become the player that they can be. And I think you see such a consistent trends where Doug will just be, I mean, he just absolutely kills everyone here, Kremp, getting into positions where he teams with guys that go on to do great things, and I'm sure helps them become great players. Even, Kevin says some war here in the replies, like, we need to get you a spot in the league at this rate because he can make a top 4 team in the league with all the talent that Doug manages to find on his rosters. So is Kremp going to go at some point into the starting team for Boston? I wouldn't be surprised, given it happened to Beans not that long ago. However, there are other teams looking for players like this, and London are going to be one. So I think this is honestly about time, but London are now looking to replace PaulEhx, and there's a high likelihood he will be gone from the team and they'll bring a replacement in. I was really confused by this whole PaulEhx saga because he was dropped and then Zero came in and then Zero was gone again and PaulEhx is back in, and it's a bit of a mess over there. And of course they made the role change now. Nasty is more on the flex position, Scraps is the main, and then you've got a Seam on the SMG, and that honestly is a pretty damn good core in my opinion. PaulEhx I don't think was ever really going to work on the SMG with that role change. He's okay in the flex position. Obviously we know that he's not going to be as good on LAN generally as he is online, and the numbers kind of replicate or back that up over the last couple of seasons. seasons. But that London team is actually not bad. Yes, they're bottom of the league, but they've been competitive with many teams this stage. They took a couple of good victories. They could have beaten OpTic. Nasty's been in like potentially top 10 player in the game form. Scraps has been getting better and better since his return, and Asim is, going to be a good rallier of the troops. Always a valuable asset to have in the team, Asim, and generally he's been pretty good this season. Okay, he was better early on, Asim, than he has been in the last month or so, but nonetheless, Asim's been a valuable asset. If they could bring in like a star SMG Slayer to the team instead of PaulEhx, their team could be seriously quite scary indeed. Now, making champs for London is going to be very challenging because I think they've got 50 points. They're, 60 points behind Minnesota Rokkr, and they might need, 190, 200 points. So they're going to have to get, they're pretty much going to have to win 3 or 4 of their online games and get top 4, top 3, maybe more than that in both remaining stages in order to have like any realistic chance. So they're going to have to be a top 4 team in the game for the next couple of stages, if not better than that, if they actually want to make it. But at least they're trying, right? Because they're not far off being solid. I mean, look at their results in stage 3. They lost game 5 to Boston. Yes, they got 3-0 by FaZe. They got beaten 3-1 by Surge, but they took down LAG game 5. They beat Toronto, the eventual champions, game 5, and they could have beaten OpTic in that major. Yes, OpTic were a much different beast on the first 2 days than they were on Saturday and beyond, but the way that Nasty especially is playing, I don't think they're far off being an actual, competitive team. London could be a solid top 8 caliber team, if not better than that, with the right changes. So I think that the PaulEhx one makes sense. You look at the KD from stage 3, you look at the impact in terms of kills per 10 minutes, engagements for 10 minutes, and okay, he was scaling a lot of the hill time, but still not quite sure it works out on the whole, and I guess that's the change they're going to decide to make. Now, the player they're looking to replace him is going to be iLLeY, or Ulysses. So it's kind of funny in a way, because when I think iLLeY, immediately my head thinks Aqua. So if you guys don't know, player Aqua, kind of a legend in the COD team, been around for a long time. He eventually got Paris Legion. Unfortunately, he joined Legion, and then his career was over effectively, which is unfortunately how it goes. But his first name, I believe, was iLLeY. So people called Aqua iLLeY, and they called iLLeY Aqua and this type of stuff. But there's another player called iLLeY, or Ulysses, who is now a star Challengers SMG player, who they are looking to bring in to replace PaulEhx on the starting team. And kind of what Crone says, this is reported by Jake Helt, maybe Crone has someone saying the same thing. And the interesting thing is that iLLeY plays with Ghosty, Fellow, and 2Real. So that team that won the, I think it was the Boston Challengers event that they won there. So Ghosty, of course, won that event, got picked up to OpTic. Fellow got picked up as a result to Florida Mutineers. 2Real got picked straight up to Legion, and iLLeY was left without a team, right? All of his teammates left him to go to the Pro League, and he was left to go elsewhere, despite the fact that many said that actually he was maybe the better SMG out of the 2 on that roster, and he's definitely been making waves for quite some time. So to me, I think this is a very sensible move. It's cool to see that London are actually trying to make a change, because I don't think they're far off being pretty good, and Nasty's hitting good levels on this role. Scraps, I think, has been getting better and better. As I say, we know how valuable a scene can be to a roster, so, one change here, a sensible change. In my opinion, they should have done this earlier, right? Like, I would argue that when Ghosty, Fellow, and 2Real were picked up, they probably should have done this then, and had they have done, they might have had a bit of a better stage. I expect them to have a better stage going forwards, but at this point, it's probably too little, too late in terms of champs qualification for them. Ronnie confirms as well here that he had the same name to this morning, or yesterday morning, so yeah, good chance indeed that this is what's going to happen over the coming days. Maybe they're going to do a trial, right? Because, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Okay, they've got 2 weeks off. They could theoretically trial a couple of players for a couple of weeks just to see if it actually works, and or at least for a week or so to see if it works, because it seems pretty obvious they want a star power potential SMG player on the team. There's potentially other candidates as well they could look at, but it seems like they're going to lock in Ulysses potentially rather quickly indeed. And as I say, all of these guys, even Nagafen, I think, because I think maybe Nagafen's helping out coaching Legion now. So this entire team, of course, we've got Ghosty, 2Real, this is iLLeY here, Fellow on the right-hand side, and Naga, the guys that won this tournament. Naga was the coach. I think they've all now been picked up to the league effectively, which is quite cool. Now, this immediately sparked a discussion on the fact that the most recent Challengers champions, the likes of course, Eric Boom, Metals, Maple, and Weeman on Team Notorious that won this past weekend, are those guys going to get picked up, right? Because the entire team that won Major 2s at Challengers Open is now in the league, we believe. Now, the team that won Major 3s Challengers Open, I don't reckon any of these guys are getting in the league. And I think that's unfortunate, and it is due in part to being a player outside of NA, and I know that we talk a lot about, European players have it hard, which is true, but as Clayster even says, players from Canada and Australia and other regions also have it hard because they also can't get a visa easily. But, like to Weeman, it's interesting for these guys, right, because Weeman's 25, he's been around for years. I think he was even on that Units team back in the Black Ops 4 days doing pretty well at the time. time. But, you know, some games he's not so good at. This game he seems to be really good at based on recent evidence. But, you know, is the team going to sign him? Not necessarily. Maple's been a phenomenal player and sniper for years. Eric Boom and Metal's like upcomers. I mean, Metal's been around ages in the challenger scene. He was cracked out of his mind in Black Ops 4 as well. You guys might remember on that Heretics roster. And Eric Boom is kind of like the latest potential up-and-comer from that region as well. So some exciting prospects. But the reality is that when you've got a guy like iLLeY on the market, he's just straight up easier to acquire. And in London's shoes, maybe you would think, like I would have said maybe, you know, a guy like Vortex, for example, right, who's done great things in the challenger scene in Europe for years. It's just tough for him to get a spot, and they'd rather go for another candidate, even if that doesn't necessarily align with that player being British. But I guess that doesn't matter too much for London nowadays. They try and keep that identity to a certain degree, but, you know, if it affects things too much, they won't really bother. So, you know, as Clay says, it's a hurdle for a significant portion of the league. Canadians, Latin Americans, Australians, even Gunless, right, had some issues for some time. He was like, look, I've got to retire if I don't marry someone quickly because I need to get a visa type thing. So it's not exactly ideal. The question I have for you guys, given this is seemingly the first change of probably quite a few that we might see over these next week or so, really, what do you think Vegas are going to do? If anything, I don't think they're going to do anything, but I think that might be a mistake if they don't, to be perfectly honest. Scump, I thought was pretty funny. He said in the replies, let me know if your roster needs me. Then he was like, bump. And Clay's like, I got a second, what are you talking about, mate? And also Los Angeles Guerrillas, whether they're going to decide to do anything. I've got to say, right, out of the 4 seasons they've been in the league, they have put together some shocking rosters. I mean, it's no surprise, really, they've decided to pull the plug, you could argue. This was the team, okay, you guys can't see Saints on the left-hand side here, but Saints, Decimate, Eggs, this is Acro, actually, we were just mentioning, and then Lacefield, that, I mean, like, what were they thinking there? Okay, whatever, first year of the league, you can kind of forgive them, right? They made some changes, they got a little bit better. Second year, they put together this team of the 4 guys that won the World Championship in 2018, because it was going back to 4v4 boots on the ground, so they thought, oh, fantastic, we'll put together the last 2 world champions in the 4 versus 4 boots on the ground game, but no Eggs and Vivid instead. And Vivid was their best player by far. This team was just not particularly good at all. Their Vanguard roster on paper was actually quite good. And let's be honest here, like Gunless was subbed out for Spart, and they won an event, right, with these guys of Asim. Asim's on the left-hand side here with, of course, Slasher and Huke. Like, this team is actually good on paper, so I'll give them some credit for that. And they did win something with it, with a small tweak and a bit of a fluke, but nonetheless, they did eventually get over the line. But then I don't know what they were thinking with this season, keeping Spartan Neptune last season. That was a terrible idea, and it is quickly gone all the way down the hill. So whether they're going to do anything further with their current roster, right, because there are some potential options out there, but iLLeY, one of the top prospects, is getting snapped up quickly by London, which is probably a wise decision from them, all things considered, if that is the case. Also, confirmation here from Mohawk that after about, a couple of days away, or a couple of weeks away, he is returning. Free agent now for next week's Season 3 Elite Qualifier. Of course, he won both of the last 2 years Challengers World Championship, so I guess he's going to try and go for the 3-peat this year on whatever roster he can potentially get picked up onto. Also, a couple of interesting brand stats. Well, this one, firstly, most series wins at a COD Champs. These are numbers that are basically never going to be topped anymore, because the way the World Championship format works nowadays, with only a few matches played compared to the top 32, like you had groups, you had the massive bracket play we used to have back in the day. Like, these are numbers that modern players are never going to get anywhere near, to be honest. Slasher, though, can make progress here. He's currently 5th on the list with 38 series wins at Champs. He can potentially, over the next couple of years, move up this, as could Clayster if he qualifies. We'll see about that one. But realistically, Slasher is like the only player, unless the format changes substantially in the coming years on this list, that can ever even have a chance to top Crim 6. Of course, everyone else is pretty much retired, and unless Clay comes back with a vengeance over the next couple of years. So very much interested to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Oh, dude.